There was another sutta where a similar list of dhammas was given to one of the Buddha's followers, Siha the general. And Siha's response was, well, those first 4 factors that you mentioned, I can see them for myself, but that last one you say, that after death you go to a good destiny, I can't see that for myself, so I'll have to take that on faith in the Buddha.
Jadi ini juga sering dilihat nanti dalam sutta-sutta yang lainnya, di mana Buddha mengatakan ini kepada Siha, seorang jenderal, di mana 4 hal yang tadi disebutkan di atas itu bisa dilihat kecuali hal yang terakhir. Yang terakhir itu bahwa akan lahir di tempat yang menyenangkan, itu tidak bisa dilihat. Jadi ini adalah sesuatu yang harus kita yakini dari ucapan Buddha.
Okay, so then after the Blessed One spent much of the night teaching the devotees of Pataligama in the Dhamma, rousing, edifying and gladdening them. So remember that short teaching which we've had, that's only just one fragment, it's only one part. It says here he went on teaching long into the night, okay? So they would have got many teachings which are not found here. After which he dismissed them, saying, the night is far advanced, householders, you may go at your convenience. So be it, Bhante. And the devotees of Pataligama rose from their seats, respectfully saluted the Blessed One, and keeping their right sides towards him, departed. And the Blessed One, soon after their departure, retired into retreat, or into privacy.
Jadi Sang Bhagawa meluangkan waktunya selama malam tersebut memberikan instruksi kepada umat Pataligama tentang Dhamma. Rousing, what do you call rousing? Actually, edifying, gladdening. Dengan semangat, supaya terinspirasi, menyemangati, ya, menyemangati. Kemudian ia akhirnya memberikan mereka izin karena sudah malam, sudah larut malam para perumah tangga, kalian boleh pulang kalau sudah perlu pulang. Mereka jawab baiklah, dan para umat Pataligama kemudian berdiri dari bangkunya dan memberikan penghormatan kepada Sang Bhagawa. Mereka meninggalkan Sang Bhagawa dengan menjaga sisi kanannya, tetap Sang Bhagawa ada di sisi kanannya. Kemudian Sang Bhagawa setelah mereka meninggalkan tempat itu masuk untuk beristirahat.
Okay, so I'll just pause there and see if anybody has any questions.
Ya, sekarang Bante ada yang ingin bertanya lagi?
Tadi panya sama wisdom dibedain katanya, itu sama apa enggak? Thank you.
He said that wisdom and panya, is it different?
No.
Enggak.
Wisdom is just a translation of panya. Lots of questions is good.
Sorry. Hope you guys are not sick looking at me. Ajahn, just want to clarify that you mentioned that, of course, the short teaching, they mentioned that the Buddha are encouraging the laymen to do goods and all those things. Of course, the central tenet seem to be telling people. Why I know this that seem to be that because this large gathering of people, so he gave a simple teaching yet very profound in this area. He encouraged them to practice well, to keep the sila, everything. So my question here is that necessary when you are reborn in heavenly realm will lead to happiness? Would that be, or was that the central message is when you do good, you accumulated so much merit, when you reborn again, you have much better so-called chance to meet Triratna or something like that, instead of when you are born in the miserable realm when you are.
Well, in this instance, he's just giving a basic teaching, and he's telling them they'll be happy if they do good. That's all. So,
but central training was that he mentioned about the karmic effect, all those things. No, he doesn't mention that.
No.
Oh, so it's just a natural when you practicing sila, you are reborn such and such in this place, and but I do understand from part of the Tipitaka also mentioned that how's the heavenly realm also, even though it's considered favorable place, if there's so much fun, not fun, so nice that sometimes they don't even practice Dharma, yet they fall even further on that. So could you highly enlighten that? So is it much better to be reborn at the so-called a place that's favorable to continue practicing Dharma rather than the heavenly and pleasant place? You know, when you're so fun, you forgot everything, and the tendency that you'll be accumulated so much demerit.
Yeah, sure, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. It's better than the other place.
Okay.
I mean, you know, going anywhere that's good is good. You can still practice Dharma in heaven, but, you know, there's lots of places in the human realm where it's very hard to practice Dharma as well, isn't it? So, yeah, I wouldn't worry about getting born in heaven.
Jadi tadi pertanyaannya adalah tadi dari audiensnya nanya kalau misalnya di sini kan Buddha mengajarkan bahwa selalu melakukan hal yang baik supaya terlahir di alam yang enak, salah satunya misalnya di surga. Apakah dengan lahir di surga itu artinya bisa bertemu ajaran Dhamma atau Triratna dengan lebih mudah dibandingkan dengan lainnya? Tapi Bante bilang bahwa di sini Buddha hanya mengajarkan ajaran-ajaran basic atau dasar, bahwa kalau kita melakukan hal yang baik maka kita akan happy atau bahagia. Jadi di sini tidak di-mention atau tidak disinggung sama sekali tentang efek daripada karma. Kemudian ditanya lagi, audiensnya nanyain, katanya kalau di surga udah keenakan, biasanya kalau udah enak biasanya lupa. Jadi nanti bisa pas udah selesai masanya akan lahir di alam yang tidak enak. Terus kata Bante nggak usah khawatir, mendingan lahir di surga daripada lahir di alam yang satu lagi sana gitu. Di surga pun masih bisa kita melatih Dhamma, dan kadang-kadang bahkan di dunia manusia pun ada saat-saatnya kita mengalami kesulitan untuk praktek Dhamma.
Okay. Now at that time, Sunita and Vasakara, the chief ministers of Magadha, were building a fortress at Pataligama in defense against the Vajjis. And the Devas, in large numbers, counted in the thousands, had taken possession of sites at Pataligama. In the region where Devas of great power prevailed, officials of great power were bent on constructing. Where Devas of medium power and lesser power prevailed, there were officials of medium and lesser power constructing buildings.
What's an edifice?
Oh, just a building.
Okay. Jadi pada saat itu Sunida dan Vasakara, jadi menteri utama dari Magadha, sedang membangun benteng di Pataligama untuk bertahan terhadap kaum Wajis dan para dewa ya. Di sana dalam jumlah yang besar, thousands, beribu-ribu, telah menetap mengambil tempat di Pataligama. Di tempat di mana para dewa-dewa dengan kekuatan yang besar ada, maka para menteri atau pejabat-pejabat di sana juga membangun tempat-tempat bagi para dewa tersebut untuk tinggal. Dan para dewa-dewa yang dengan kekuatan medium atau kekuatan lebih kecil, pejabat-pejabat di sana juga membangun tempat untuk mereka.
So you can see that even though Ajatasattu seemed to be asking for the Buddha's advice about whether he should go to war with the Vajjis, but in fact he's going full ahead with the preparations for war anyway.
Jadi walaupun Raja Ajatasattu meminta pendapat dari Sang Bagawa, sebenarnya kita bisa lihat di sini bahwa walau apapun yang dikatakan Sang Bagawa, Ajatasattu tetap membangun benteng untuk bersiap-siap melakukan perang dengan kaum Wajis.
And I can't help but be reminded of several wars that have happened recent days where countries have pretended to be negotiating about things, meanwhile all the preparations for war are going ahead.
Jadi sebenarnya sama juga di zaman kita sekarang, walaupun tampaknya dua negara sedang bernegosiasi, tapi mereka sebenarnya diam-diam sudah bersiap-siap untuk berperang satu sama lainnya.
Of course, from a Buddhist point of view, this is a very kind of bittersweet thing. Of course, you know, we never support going to war, especially just a very aggressive war like this. But at the same time, in building Pataligama, they're transforming it into Pataliputta, which was to become the great capital of King Ashoka. And through King Ashoka, of course, Buddhism spread over the whole world, or at least over the whole of Asia.
Jadi hal ini buat Sang Buddha sesuatu hal yang pahit juga manis. Walaupun perangnya belum agresif, tapi di sini kita bisa lihat bahwa Pataligama sudah dirubah menjadi sebuah benteng. Dan tempat ini nantinya akan menjadi tempat Raja Asoka yang kita tahu nantinya menyebarkan agama Buddha.
And the fact of the building at Pataliputta was and in itself was an expression of confidence by King Ajatasattu, because Rajagaha, the traditional capital of Magadha, was in the middle of the Magadhan region and is surrounded by hills. It's a very fortified and easily defensible location. Whereas Pataliputta is right on the river Ganges. It's very hard to defend. It's chosen by a king who's very confident that he's not going to be invaded and whose main aim was to secure the trading routes up and down the Ganges.
Jadi sebenarnya kalau kita lihat benteng dibangun di Pataligaha ini bukan karena Ajatasattu begitu yakinnya. Kerajaan Raja Gaha itu tempat di mana Ajatasattu tinggal itu dikelilingi oleh bukit-bukit. Jadi tempat tersebut tentu saja sangat mudah untuk dipertahankan. Sedangkan Pataligama ini berada dekat di Sungai Gangga. Kenapa dibangun benteng? Sebenarnya untuk mempertahankan bahwa trading ya, jual beli di sana bisa dia secure, bisa dia pertahankan Ajatasattu.
And so the Buddha saw those devas and so on, and he asked Venerable Ananda, who Ananda is erecting the city at Pataligama? Ananda said it's Sunida and Vasakara, Lord, the chief ministers of Magadha.
Jadi ketika Sang Bhagawa melihat dengan matanya, ya, dia siapa yang sedang beliau menanyakan kepada Ananda, siapa yang sedang membangun di kota Pataligama. Kemudian Ananda menjawab bahwa Sunida dan Vasakara, mereka adalah perdana menteri utama dari Magadha.
And the Buddha went on to say, Ananda, it's as if Sunida and Vasakara had taken counsel, taken advice with the gods of the 33. And he went on to talk about how the devas are congregating on the building sites. The Buddha then says, Ananda, as far as the Aryan people, Aryan race, I don't think that should be, there's no Aryan race in Pali. I'd have to look at the Pali. I missed that one. Anyway, as far as the Aryan culture, perhaps better, extends and trade routes spread, this will be the foremost city, Pataliputta, a centre of trade. But, Ananda, Pataliputta will be assailed by 3 perils: fire, water, and dissension.
What's dissension?
Conflict, inner conflict.
Okay. Jadi Ananda, Sunida, dan Vasakara telah mengambil advice daripada dewa-dewa 33. Kemudian di tempat tersebut para pejabat yang telah mendirikan tempat-tempat buat para dewa, di sini Sang Bhagawa mengatakan bahwa budaya Aryan, culture, right? It's not race, right?
It's certainly not race. I'm not exactly sure what it is. I should check that. Definitely it's not Aryan race.
Budaya Aryan yang telah menyebar dan tempat situ adalah rute perdagangan ya. Jadi ini nantinya akan merupakan kota tempat trading yang paling besar di sini. Tapi kata Sang Bhagawa, kota tersebut akan menghadapi 3 bencana oleh api, air, dan konflik internal.
So this is one of the few occasions where the Buddha makes a prediction about the future, that this is going to be the struggles for Pataliputta. However, you have to say that it was a fairly easy prediction to make. First of all, Pataliputta was built of wood, so to say that it's going to have the danger of fire was not didn't take great psychic powers. It's built on a marshland next to the Ganges River, so it's the idea that it's going to be troubled by flood also didn't really take a Buddha to say that. And the fact that it's going to be troubled by dissension, well, who isn't, right? So it's an interesting point, because, and the reason I make this point is because it's not clear from the Pali Suttas whether the Buddha was able to really see the future. In fact, most of the times he never claimed to be able to see the future. So in this kind of case, you can see it seems like a fairly reasonable prediction, but doesn't necessarily mean he could read the future.
Jadi di sini sangat menarik, Buddha membuat prediksi tentang masa depan dari Pataliputta. Di sini, tapi sebenarnya prediksi ini bukan didasarkan dengan kekuatan psikik ya, kekuatan paranormal. Karena Buddha sendiri tidak pernah mengatakan bahwa dirinya bisa memprediksi masa depan. Di sini bisa diprediksi karena secara logis Pataliputta itu kotanya dibuat dari kayu-kayu, dan seperti kita tahu kayu itu mudah terbakar. Kemudian dia tanahnya itu adalah tanah rawa-rawa sehingga karena dekat dengan Sungai Gangga sehingga mudah terancam banjir. Sedangkan konflik internal, tempat mana yang tidak ada konflik internal? Di mana-mana selalu ada konflik internal.
Then Sunita and Wasakara went to the Blessed One after courteously greeting the Buddha, exchanging many pleasant words. They stood at one side and addressed him thus: "May the Venerable Gautama please accept our invitation for tomorrow's meal, together with the Sangha of bhikkhus." And the Blessed One consented by silence.
Kemudian Sunita dan Wasakara pergi kepada Sang Bagawa, dan setelah menyapa dengan sopan kepada Sang Bagawa dan bertukar kata-kata yang menyenangkan, mereka berdiri pada satu sisi dan mengatakan hal ini kepada Sang Bagawa. Semoga Sang Bagawa berkenan menerima undangan kami untuk jamuan makan besok dan dengan komunitas para biku lainnya. Kemudian Sang Bagawa menyetujuinya dengan berdiam diri.
Then, knowing the Blessed One had consented, Sunita and Wasakara departed for their own homes, where they had choice food, hard and soft, prepared. Just a little note on this idiom. You'll find this idiom mentioned a lot in the suttas. It talks about hard food and soft food. Actually, it doesn't really mean hard food and soft food. It's just an idiom. Actually, what's translated as soft food is bhojaniyang, means staple food like rice and bread and so on. And the kadniyang is the accompaniments, the curries and spices and things like that.
The hard one is the rice?
The accompaniments, the curries and spices and things. Yeah.
Jadi setelah mengetahui bahwa Sang Bagawa telah menyetujui, Sunita dan Wasakara meninggalkan tempat tersebut dan kembali ke tempat mereka menetap, di mana mereka mempunyai pilihan terhadap makanan keras maupun makanan yang lunak disiapkan. Nah, ini Bante mengatakan bahwa makanan lunak dan keras ini hanya istilah, jadi bukan makanan yang benar-benar keras atau makanan yang lunak. Yang disebut makanan lunak adalah nasi misalnya, kemudian roti, sedangkan makanan keras itu adalah makanan padanannya atau lauknya seperti kari.
Okay, so I won't read the whole passage, but the Buddha goes there and takes his meal. Then Sunita and Wasakara take low seats and sat down at one side.
Bante tidak akan membacakan semuanya. Jadi setelah Sang Bagawa mengambil makanannya, kemudian Sunita dan Wasakara duduk di sebelah Sang Bagawa, di satu sisi Sang Bagawa.
And then the Buddha gave the Anumodana verses.
Kemudian Buddha mengucapkan terima kasih seperti puisi ini.
Wherever he may dwell, the prudent man offers food to the spiritual and the virtuous, and he dedicates his merits to the local devas. So revered, they revere him. Honored, they honor him. They love him even as a mother loves a child. The man who the gods love will always see good fortune.
Setelah itu Bagawa mengatakan, dimanapun seseorang tinggal, what's prudent?
Wise.
Orang yang bijaksana mempersembahkan makanannya kepada mereka yang spiritual dan baik silanya, dan mereka mendedikasikan jasa kebajikan tersebut kepada dewa-dewa yang di sekitar tempat tersebut. Karena mereka telah menghormati, maka orang tersebut pun akan dihormati. Karena orang tersebut juga menghargai, maka ia juga akan dihargai, dan ia akan dicintai seperti seorang ibu mencintai anaknya. Orang yang dicintai oleh dewa-dewa selalu melihat keberuntungan yang baik.
So it's sometimes asked about whether the practice of dedicating merit is really a Buddhist practice, or whether actually it's like a Hindu practice or something. But here we see that, like many of the popular religious practices, it was something which is mentioned occasionally in the Pali Canon, and it was something that the Buddha encouraged. It's like kind of good neighborliness to offer something and to dedicate some merit for the local devas.
Jadi biasanya sering ditanya kebiasaan untuk mendedikasikan kebajikan kita kepada dewa-dewa itu adalah kebiasaan Hindu atau Buddha. Di sini kita bisa lihat bahwa Sang Buddha pun sebenarnya encourage apa ya? I can't find the word Indonesian for encourage.
Encourage.
Ya. menyemangati. Sebenarnya maksudnya Buddha itu juga menyetujui perlakuan bahwa kita kalau melakukan sesuatu yang kebaikan itu kita dedikasikan juga kepada dewa-dewa di sekitar kita, bahwa itu perbuatan yang Sang Buddha juga setuju.
Okay, so this is the Pali of the verse, and I just put this Pali there because I find it's interesting because the anumodanas that we do today when we recite like the Sabityo Vivajantu and so on, most of those are actually not found in the suttas, but this is an example of an anumodana which is found in the early suttas. Yasming padese kapeti vasang pandita jatiyo silavantet tabhojet vasanyate brahmacharyo yatat tadevata asung tasang dakkirnamadise tapujita pujayanti manita manayananti nang tato nang anukampanti mata putang va orasang devata anukampito poso sada bahadrani passati.
Ya, seperti itu tadi yang
That's right. Well, you don't need to do it. So I just wanted to do that because just to give you some kind of feel for the language that's being used.
Bante membacakan itu supaya kita dapat merasakan kalau bahasa itu digunakan. Jadi pernyataan terima kasih atau anumodana seperti yang kita sering dengar yang sabe, tiyo, wiwa, jantu itu biasanya itu tidak terdapat dalam sutta tapi ada dikutip di tempat-tempat lainnya.
So then Sunita and Wasikara followed behind the Blessed One, step by step, saying, through whichever gate the recluse Gotama will depart today, we will name that the Gotama Gate. The ford by which he will cross the river Ganges shall be named the Gotama Ford. And so it came to pass where the gate was concerned.
Jadi Sunida dan Wasakara mengikuti di belakang Sang Bagawa, langkah demi langkah mengatakan, gerbang manapun yang dilewati oleh Pertapa Gotama pada hari ini, pada saat ia meninggalkannya, maka gerbang tersebut akan disebut sebagai gerbang Gotama. Dan benteng manapun yang dia lewati melalui sungai Gangga, itu akan dinamakan benteng Gotama. Dan hari itu ia melewati gerbangnya.
And just as a little aside, but just at the modern day Pataliputta, of course, is Patna. And crossing the Ganges at Patna is the biggest land bridge in India, I think in South Asia. And it's a very huge bridge. And I always thought that it was a shame that that bridge wasn't called the Gautama Bridge after this passage here. In fact, it's called the Mahatma Gandhi Bridge. So I think that's all right. If it's named after Mahatma Gandhi, that's okay.
Jadi kalau yang udah pernah ke sana di River Gangga itu ada satu jembatan yang melintasi Sungai Gangga. Di sini kan di Sutta mestinya katanya dinamain Gotama ya, tapi ternyata tidak dinamain Gotama, dinamainnya Mahatma Gandhi. Tapi kata Bante nggak apa-apa lah kalau Mahatma Gandhi.
Alright, but when the Blessed One came to the river Ganges, it was full to the brim so that crows could drink from it. And the Ganges at that point is very, very wide and there's lots of marshes and so on. It's very hard to cross. Some people went in search of a boat or a float while others tied up a raft because they wanted to get across. But the Blessed One, as quickly as a strong man might stretch out his bent arm or draw in his outstretched arm, vanished from this side of the river Ganges and came to stand on the far side.
Jadi ketika Sang Bagawa tiba di tepi dari Sungai Gangganya itu penuh sampai meluap sehingga burung-burung gagak pun dapat minum. Kalau pada saat itu Sungai Gangga itu demikian luas dan banyak rawa-rawanya ya, banyak tumbuh-tumbuhannya di situ. Dan bahkan beberapa orang mencari perahu ataupun apa yang bisa mengapung getek ya, dan kemudian mengikat beberapa kayu untuk dibuat menjadi tempat buat menyeberang seperti getek supaya mereka bisa menyeberang. Tetapi bagi Sang Bagawa dengan cepat seperti seorang yang kuat, cukup menjulurkan tangannya, membengkokkannya, dia langsung hilang dari satu sisi Sungai Gangga, langsung ada di sisi satunya lagi.
And when he saw the people wanting to cross, searching for a boat and others binding rafts, he gave forth this following saying, "They crossed the vast stream, having bridged the marshes, while people still tie rafts together, the wise have already crossed over."
Dan ketika Sang Bagawa melihat orang-orang yang ingin menyeberang dan masih mencari perahu ataupun getek, dan beberapa orang bahkan masih sibuk mengikat yang ingin dibuat menjadi getek, maka Sang Bagawa pada saat melihat hal tersebut mengatakan hal ini. Mereka dapat melintasi sungai yang demikian derasnya setelah membuat jembatan untuk menyeberangi rawa-rawa ini. Bahkan orang-orang masih sibuk mengikat kayu-kayu yang sebagai getek itu, orang-orang yang bijaksana telah menyeberanginya.
And so with that, the Buddha has left Magadha and moved into the Vajjian country. Yeah? So as I said at the beginning, he's like moving away from Ajatasattu and his more belligerent, aggressive regime towards the Vajjian, the more peaceful Vajjian community. And so he's moving ever closer to Kusinara, to the place where he'll pass away.
Jadi dengan demikian Sang Bagawa telah menyeberangi Sungai Gangga dari sisi Magadha mendekati ke sisi kaum Waji yang lebih peaceful, lebih damai, karena Magadha itu Ajatasattu berdiam di sana, dan seperti kita ketahui beliau sudah mendekati tempat beliau akan parinibbana, yaitu Kusinara.
So any questions before we
pertanyaan?
move on?
Actually, I do.
Yeah.
At that time the people can see the deities because they built places for deities.
No, they weren't building the places for the deities, but what he's saying is that where they were building the buildings and the devas would come.
The edifice.
Yeah. So they were building the buildings, and then the devas came to where they were doing the building.
So they don't actually see the devas and just built them.
Only the Buddha saw them.
Oh, okay. Jadi saya nanya karena tadi ada kalimatnya di situ seolah-olah manusia pada saat itu bisa ngelihat dewa. Saya nanya apakah pada saat itu manusia bisa melihat dewa karena mereka membangun tempat. Katanya Bante, mereka hanya membangun tempat, tapi yang melihat ada dewa masuk ke dalam tempat itu hanya Sang Buddha.
So then the Blessed One spoke to Venerable Ananda, saying, "Come, Ananda, let us go to Kotigama." So be it, Lord. And the Blessed One took up his abode at Kotigama together with a large sangha of bhikkhus.
Sekarang Sang Bagawa mengatakan kepada Yang Mulia Ananda, mengatakan,
and the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus, saying, "Bhikkhus, it is through not realizing, through not penetrating the Four Noble Truths, that this long course of birth and death, this long samsara of birth and death, has been passed through and undergone by me as well as by you." What are these four? They are the noble truth of suffering, the noble truth of the origin of suffering, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, and the noble truth of the way to the cessation of suffering. But now, because that these have been realized and penetrated, the craving for existence has been cut off. That which leads to future rebirth has been destroyed, and there is no more birth in the future.
Dan Sang Bagawa mengatakan ini kepada para biku. Para biku, karena tidak merealisasi dan karena tidak mempenetrasi 4 kesunyatan mulia, maka kelahiran yang begini panjang dan kematian yang kita telah lalui baik oleh saya maupun oleh kalian. Apakah keempat hal tersebut? 4 kesunyatan mulia adalah, yang pertama adalah adanya duka atau penderitaan, yang kedua adalah asal muasal daripada duka, yang ketiga adalah terhentinya duka, yang keempat adalah jalan menuju terhentinya duka. Tapi sekarang biku, karena hal-hal tersebut telah direalisasi dan dipenetrasi, maka diputuslah nafsu keinginan untuk menjadi yang hal tersebut adalah yang menyebabkan kita terlahir kembali, sehingga di masa depan tidak ada lagi kelahiran.
So once more we see the Buddha emphasizing, reminding the Sangha of these central teachings.
Di sini kita melihat bahwa Buddha menekankan dan mengingatkan kita kembali tentang ajaran-ajaran yang utamanya.
And the Buddha then summed up that teaching with a verse, "Through not seeing the Four Noble Truths, long was the weary path from birth to birth. When these are seen and the rope of rebirth is destroyed, the root of sorrow plucked, then ends rebirth."
Inilah hal yang dikatakan oleh Sang Bagawa, orang yang bahagia dan guru utama. bahwa dengan tidak melihat 4 kesunyataan mulia, maka menderitalah, jalan kita ini menderita dan panjang dari satu kelahiran ke kelahiran yang lainnya. Tapi apabila kita bisa melihat 4 kesunyataan mulia, maka rantai atau tali dari kelahiran kembali dihancurkan dan akar daripada penderitaan telah dicabut, dan ini mengakhiri kelahiran kembali.
So this is just another one that I've chosen to show you both the Pali and the Sanskrit. And you can compare the Pali verses up the top here with the Sanskrit verses down the bottom. If you look at the first phrase, Chaturnang Arya Satyanang, in Sanskrit, Chaturnang Arya Satyanang. So just the same in Pali and Sanskrit. So for these Four Noble Truths.
Ini hal lainnya yang Bante telah pilih untuk diperbandingkan Palinya dan Sanskritnya. Yang di atas adalah yang Pali, yang di bawah adalah yang Sanskrit. Keduanya membabarkan hal yang sama.
Yatha bhutang adasana, in Sanskrit, yatha bhutang adarshanat, through not seeing them as they really are.
Jadi yang catunang tadi itu adalah 4 kesunyataan mulia, yang bait keduanya adalah dengan tidak melihat hal tersebut.
Next line, sangsitang dighamadhanang, in Sanskrit is sangsritang dirghamadhanang, which means I have been in samsara for a long, long time.
Yang ini artinya adalah saya telah berada dalam sengsara untuk waktu yang lama sekali.
And so all of those lines are basically the same, but the next line is a little bit different. The Pali says tasu tasveva jatisu, which means being reborn in place after place, or being reborn here and there again and again.
Yang Palinya dengan yang Sanskritnya artinya agak berbeda. Yang Pali berarti dilahirkan dari tempat ke tempat, lagi dan lagi, berulang-berulang.
Whereas the Sanskrit says maya yushma bhirevacha, which means that I've been reborn in samsara myself, just as you have been as well.
Ya, sedangkan yang Sanskritnya mengatakan bahwa saya telah dilahirkan kembali, demikian juga Anda.
So the next line again very similar. Tani etani ditani, tani satyani drishtrani, is having seen those truths.
Jadi yang Pali dan Sanskrit ini sama dengan melihatnya 4 kesunyataan mulia.
Bhavaneti samuhata, in Sanskrit bhavanetri samudrita, is the same meaning. The cord of rebirth, which is called craving, connecting us to rebirth, has been destroyed.
Ya, arti yang Pali dengan yang Sanskrit di sini adalah sama, bahwa yang menyebabkan kita lahir kembali adalah craving atau nafsu keinginan.
And the next line is a little bit different, but the same similar meaning. The Pali says Chinnang mulang dukkasa, which means the root of dukkha, of suffering, has been cut off.
Yang Palinya hampir sama artinya dengan yang Sanskrit, bahwa akar dari penderitaan telah diputuskan.
Whereas the Sanskrit says that the samsara, the coursing on of rebirth, has been ended.
Sedangkan yang Sanskrit mengatakan bahwa penyebab daripada duka telah diakhiri.
And then finally they have the same last phrase, natidani punabhavo, in Sanskrit nasti daning punarbhava, which means now there is no more rebirth.
Yang Sanskrit dan Palinya ini mempunyai arti yang sama, yaitu sekarang tidak ada lagi kelahiran kembali.
So again, as with the previous ones, we see there's some slight differences in phrasing, but basically the verses are the same.
Jadi di sini kita bisa melihat bahwa perbedaannya hanya sedikit, mungkin phrasing kalimatnya berbeda, tapi sebenarnya intinya adalah sama.
Okay. And then the Buddha at Kotabhigama once more taught the bhikkhus, such is sila, such is samadhi, such is panya. When samadhi is imbued with sila, it is of great fruit and benefit. When wisdom is imbued with samadhi, it is of great fruit and benefit. When the mind is imbued with panya, it is completely freed from the defilements of desire, rebirth, and ignorance.
Dan di Kotigama, Sang Bhagawa juga memberikan advice yang sama seperti yang di depan, bahwa ini adalah sila, ini adalah samadhi, ini adalah panya. Ketika samadhi didukung atau diisi penuh dengan sila, maka besar buahnya dan besar manfaatnya. Ketika kebijaksanaan diisi dengan samadhi, maka besar buahnya dan besar manfaatnya. Ketika batin diisi dengan kebijaksanaan, maka ia terbebas dari segala kekotoran batin, nafsu keinginan, kelahiran kembali, dan kebodohan.
So each place he goes to, he teaches something different. But he also teaches something the same.
Jadi dalam setiap tempat di mana Buddha pergi, Buddha mengajarkan hal yang berbeda, sedikit berbeda, tapi juga mengajarkan hal yang sama.
Okay, when he'd stayed at Kotigama, as long as he pleased, he spoke to Venerable Ananda, saying, "Come Ananda, let us go to Nadika." And he went to Nadika together with a large sangha of bhikkhus staying in the brick house.
Jadi Sang Bhagawa setelah tinggal di Kotidama selama yang beliau inginkan, kemudian beliau mengatakan kepada Yang Mulia Ananda, "Mari Ananda, kita pergi ke Nadika." Baiklah Sang Bhagawa. Kemudian mereka menetap di Nadika bersama dengan komunitas biku yang besar, tinggal di rumah yang berbata, brick itu bata.
Then Ananda went to the Blessed One, greeted him respectfully and sat down at one side. He said, "Here in Nadika, Lord, there has passed away the bhikkhu Salha and the bhikkhuni Nanda. Likewise have passed away the layman Sudatta, the laywoman Sujata, also Kakuda, Kalinga, Nikata, Katisabha, Tutta, Santutta, Bada, and Subhadda. What is their destiny, Lord? What is their future state?"
Kemudian Yang Mulia Ananda mendekati Sang Bhagawa dan setelah memberikan penghormatan kepada beliau duduk di satu sisi dan ia mengatakan kepada Sang Bhagawa, di sini di Nadika Sang Bhagawa telah meninggal Bhikkhu Salha, Bhikkhuni Nanda, demikian juga telah meninggal orang awam Sudatta dan orang awam yang wanita Sujata. Begitu juga Kakuda, Kaliga, Nikata, Katisaba, Tutta, Samtutta, Bada, dan Subada. Apakah yang menjadi nasib mereka Sang Bhagawa? Bagaimana keadaan kondisi mereka di masa depan?
So we're returning to this theme of death and passing away.
Ya, ini balik lagi ke tema kematian, death and passing away.
Yeah.
Kematian.
The sutta doesn't give any explanation as to why all of these people have died.
Di sutta tidak memberikan penjelasan mengapa orang-orang ini meninggal.
But in the commentary it says that the city or the town had been hit with the plague. Many people had got sick and perished that way.
Tapi dalam komentar dinyatakan bahwa orang-orang ini meninggal karena sakit.